Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Have and Two Roll podcast. My name is Oliver. On this show, Robin and myself are talking with Scarlett. Scarlett is a LARPer, a costume designer, a costume creator, a cosplayer. We discuss the Empire LARP system in which Scarlett plays. We discuss what it's like to play an Archmage. We discuss magic. We discuss the Eternals. In the second half of this show, we discuss History and Virtue, which is an Empire player event run by Scarlett. We talk about the event itself and the type of things that go into running sanctioned player events for Empire. If you're watching this on YouTube, consider giving this video a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you are new here. That really helps us out. If you're listening on your favorite audio platform, you can leave us a nice review. That will also help us out. If you want to support us or get in contact with us, the information is in the episode description. And without further ado, we'll get to our conversation with Scarlett. We were just, before we started recording, we were just talking about thrift store, which is charity shops in the UK, which embarrassingly took me a long time to figure out, because I was like, what are these thrift stores that American YouTubers keep talking about, but they're actually just charity shops. And we were saying that it's not always as easy for some reason in the UK, because there's a lot of just new stuff in there for getting things like LARP kit. And Scarlett was saying something interesting before we start recording as well, that you were saying about going on eBay and getting job lots of things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually, if I'm looking for stuff, I'll go on to eBay and I'll type in like job lot of costume jewelry or job lot brooches or something like that. And usually that means you'll get a bunch of random brooches or bits of costume jewelry that you can usually buy for pretty cheap, because it is just random stuff, but it's useful for LARP because, yeah, if you just like, oh, I need a specific like if I need like a random thing to be a magical item or whatever, just type it in and you can find stuff. And also it's really cheap, and anything you don't need you can flog. You can trade or sell, or you're suddenly like, oh, I've got this random piece that if someone else needs it, I've got it. It's useful, and it's how I get most of my bits and bobs.
But you're a crafter as well, right? So it's you can make, you're going to be making most of your stuff. Do you get to make most of your soft kit, or do you, because you
all of my soft kit is made. I the only bits I've not made is a couple of undershirts, which are just some cheap cotton curters, again from eBay, for like a $5 each. But everything else is made by me. Sometimes regrettably made by me, because I always have the urge to, I really want a new outfit. Should just make a new outfit, and then I have to remind myself, no, it's 2 weeks before the event, you really shouldn't make a new outfit, but you have too much to do.
And especially if you've got the skills, you like overstretch, don't you? You're just like, I can make this awesome thing, and I bet I could make it in a couple of weeks. It'll be fine.
Oh, totally. I mean, I'm at the point now I can easily wear a different outfit each day at Empire, and maybe even have a couple of outfits a day. So I don't need to make any more kit, and I've got stuff for wet weather, I've got stuff for cold weather, hot weather. So I'm pretty much sorted in terms of kit. It's now just when I get the urge. I admit I do have to make some mage armor, but I've also got to finish off some commissions as well before E1. So the mage armor is just going to be a very quick zoom through the machine and throw a lot of bling at it, and hopefully that'll do for now.
What's the Empire rules for like mage armor, like material? Does it have to be a certain material, or can you just say this is mage armor? And
as long as it looks magical is the vibe they go for. So I've seen people do all sorts of things. I've seen people make it out of foam. I've seen people do stuff with like armor. I've seen people make stuff out of cloth. It has to cover 3 areas, which I believe one of them is the chest or torso kind of area. It doesn't have to be the full chest, but like you can have a big hero belt as one of the pieces, or something on your shoulders, for example. And then the other areas are your head, your arms, or your legs. So as long as you have 3 areas covered, that's that's your mage armor.
Yeah.
I tend to interpret mage armor as sparkly and glittery, and if you're out in the sun and it's shimmery, it's like clearly it's magical. Maybe it's a bit
Yeah.
glowy. It's got some glow in the dark on it. Oh yeah, clearly magical.
Yeah, and I
So
like.
like, could you,
Go on,
like,
sorry,
could
Robin.
you have metal armor as mage armor as well? Because I always thought before when I was reading about mage armor, I thought it wasn't allowed to be like sort of plate or anything like that, which really put me off at first. But can it be like metal and leather and
So
different
in
things?
theory, you can have metal and leather mage armor, but again, it has to look magical, but it can't also then be used as metal armor.
Right,
So
got it. Yeah.
so it's either mage armor or metal armor, and it has to be distinct from the two. So I've seen people do you can get those one-armed like sort of gladiator style leather
Yeah.
pauldron type
Yeah.
things. I've seen people do them for mage armor. Now technically that would be leather armor, but again, because they've like covered it in runes and stuff, like maybe stuck some light up stuff on it, it then looks magical, so it counts as mage armor. So it's that sort of blend of the two. It's but yeah, you can't be wearing it and then decide now it's suddenly metal armor and I get the extra hit points.
I've seen a few people like just obviously incorporate, instead of it just being leather or metal or plastic, they've like incorporated it into fabric, so it's just like a piece here with fabric around it. And like you said, you can do some real simple just patterns like leather carving that to make it for some reason like straight lines look definitely like mage-ish, because they look like runes, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I finished a commission a couple of months ago for a chap in the league who wanted his shoulder cape to be part of his mage armor, and that was a really fun thing to do. So he wanted it sort of nautical themed. So the cape it's got glitter all over it. It's got runes in the shape of like sea creatures. And I even got some juggling balls that glow, like the ones that glow in the dark, and
Oh
made them
wow.
look like fishing buoys, so they hang from it. So again, it's like it's glowy, it's sparkly, and it's very obviously it's more than just a cape. It's like it's a magic cape. So it's all little things like that.
How do you make the fabric glittery? Like if somebody wanted to make fabric look glittery, how would that person do
Tell
that?
us your secrets.
So to be quite honest, I buy tool with glitter on it. So if you look up glitter tool, TULLE, it's like a very thin mesh, and you can get it in different colors, and I just overlay it over my base fabric, and it makes the whole fabric look glittery. It's a really simple way of doing it. But it looks really effective when you've got it done. And there's so many different types of glitter tool out there with designs on, big swirls in glitter and all sorts of things. You can really play around with it. Yeah, I love it.
Like that sounds like a lot of fun. Like I've seen the like faux leather, the holographic faux leather. Like could you even use like things like that to make like cool like because I feel like holographic things look quite magical.
Oh, totally. I mean, again, it's very much up to how you want to interpret it, really. I think that's the fun part about mage armor is you can really kind of have a good play with it. I've seen someone who's had it was leather armor and then they inserted LED wire in it.
Oh wow.
So it had like almost like underlighting when they went out, and that looked really cool. So yeah, it's very much like how you want to interpret mage armor and have a bit of a play. And at the end of the day, if you're walking around in something and you're carrying a big stick, I think most people are going to assume you're a mage anyway.
You can really play with a brief, I guess, and
Absolutely.
really push it. So
I've seen people do scale mail, beautiful like scale mail, like shoulder pieces and stuff for mage armor. So yeah, it's really play around really and have some fun with it.
Yeah. So obviously you're a costume maker, but you were you're a cosplayer as well, like us, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what?
Yes. Well, I haven't cosplayed for a long time, but I'm getting back into it again now.
Yeah, it's funny. Because we're starting to miss it because we stopped for quite a while, and now we're just kind of like looking and going, oh, I kind of miss I kind of miss miss going to some of the conventions, you know. So
Yeah.
what came
Yeah,
first, Scarlett? Was it the cosplay or the LARP that came first?
it was definitely the cosplay. I
Hmm.
started cosplaying when I was 16 in 2006. That shows how old I am. And I always take this as a piece of pride. My first cosplay was Elle from Death Note, but it was about 6 months before Death Note became big in the
Nice,
UK.
nice.
So I remember going to MCM Expo, as it was known back then,
Hmm.
which was only as big as one hall. It was tiny. It was so empty. You could run around, without bumping into people. It was
Oh,
great.
that's OG. Wow.
It was £35 a ticket. It was so cheap.
Back in the
Um,
day.
Back in the day, and yeah, the following October, suddenly everyone was cosplaying from Death Note. So I have that as a point of pride. But
I was the first.
yeah, literally, it was us, it was me and my friends and one other group of people, and we were both like, Death Note fans. So yeah, but it is always that thing of, yes, my first cosplay was Elle, and I'm trying to take what little pride I can from that.
That's where a lot of the magic is in cosplay. That was my favorite
Mm.
when my first ever cosplay. One of the magic moment was going through a convention hall and then spotting someone from the other side of the convention hall that you didn't know. And when I started cosplaying, I wasn't quite social as I am now, but just
Mm,
having that connection without having to walk
absolutely.
up and be like, "Oh, hey, what's your name?" You just
You
that.
instantly know the other person likes the same thing you do, and so you
Yeah.
can have a convers. I mean, I did go to Japan Expo in
Mhm.
Paris once. When was that? 2015,
Uh-huh. Was
something like
that
that.
the
Okay.
European
That's
cosplay gathering? Was it?
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
that was when they had the yeah, that was when they had the cosplay gathering
Hmm.
there. Really good event. Loved going to it. But going to France, you're a bit nervous, and I remember literally walking into the hall, and I was cosplaying Simon from Gurren Lagann,
Hmm.
and just walking in, wasn't thinking anything of it, and out of nowhere, this girl dressed as Luffy came charging towards me and just hugged me and started speaking very, very quickly in French to me. And I'm going to admit my French is appalling. I can just about say, I'm sorry, I don't speak French, I'm English. And
Yeah, yeah. You
and
probably
and
came through that English
bless her, she was
education
so
system.
sweet. Obviously, her English was impeccable, and immediately once I
Obviously.
said I was English, she switched over. But again, it was just so nice that even in like a foreign country, someone who literally speaks a different language to me can just get so excited. We had a lovely chat about Gurren Lagann, and it was great. So
Mm.
yeah, I mean, I love cosplay. But yeah, it sort of hit a point. Yeah, sort of mid 2010s, where I was getting a bit bored of it. I think it was when Comic Con was getting really, really big and a bit
Mhm.
overwhelming. Um, and the cosplay scene, it was all getting a bit, don't want to sound rude, it was getting a bit e-girly, if
Yeah.
you know what I mean. And I just wasn't liking the vibe so much.
Hmm.
And then one of my friends from uni, he said to me, "Oh, well, I've been doing this thing called LARP," and he'd been doing it since like the 90s.
Wow.
He'd
Yeah.
been doing LARP forever. Um, and he said, "You like cosplay? Maybe you'd like this LARP thing." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll give it a go." So I went to the penultimate Maelstrom event.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Okay. Probably
wow.
a good time to
Okay.
jump in, I imagine.
Yeah, well, you say that. To be quite honest, no. Because it was the second to last
Hmm.
Maelstrom event ever, and this was my first LARP ever, so I had no idea what was going
What's going
on.
on? Yeah.
It was completely mad. Obviously, the game was sort of winding, like coming to its end.
Yeah.
So it was a bit like I mostly just stood there and was like, I have no idea what's going on, but I know I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
Um, but sort of not enough. I've kind of was like, there's no point me going to the last game. I didn't make any effect in the game I went to, and obviously the game's finishing, so what's the point?
Yeah.
Um, but then I heard that obviously there was this game Empire happening, and I
Hmm.
thought, oh, well, that sounds fun. When that one starts up, I'll give it a go. So yeah, I got to go to that. So I'm a year one player, not E1 player. I didn't
E1, okay.
go to the Frost event.
The cold event.
Yeah, I narrowly missed that one. I think I was doing uni stuff at the time or something. Couldn't make it, but I'm quite glad of that. But yeah, pretty much been going to Empire ever since. So yeah.
So are you still playing the same character from all that time, or?
I went to my very first Empire event. I did technically make a character. I can't even remember their name now because it was very much I want to see what this new game is about before I make any decisions and stuff like that. And then the next event I went to, which I believe was E3 of the first year, I then made Luke, who is my current character, who I'm still playing right now.
Oh wow.
I started him off as a 14-year-old squire in Highguard, with the idea being he's just finished his military service, he's just passed his citizenship test, and that way it's okay for me to not know everything because I can learn as my character learns. So he's now 22 now in the game, and like he's legitimately like grown up and gone through puberty in the game, which has been a really fun thing to do.
That sounds like such a cool. I've not actually heard of somebody like doing it like that before, like bringing a character in and just being like, yeah, like they've just passed the citizenship test, or just gonna grow up and just grow with them. That's really smart.
Yeah, it's been really good and interesting fun. Like, so much has happened to the character as they've grown and as the game has grown. It's been really interesting, and I find it quite fun in the sense of, I hear people be like, oh, I once heard this thing happened in the game, and I'm sitting there going like, yeah, I was there for that thing. This is how it went down, or this is my character's opinion on this thing. It's great fun, and my character's attitudes and viewpoints have changed as the game has evolved, and it's been really interesting and really good fun. I mean, I don't know if I could do that sort of character again, just because I have so much knowledge about the game now. I don't think I could come in as a character who just doesn't know all that different stuff now.
Yeah.
But it's I'm glad I did what I did. And I've got to thank a lot of, especially long-term LARPers in general, for giving me a lot of support when I first started the game. I definitely wouldn't be where I am in the game now if it wasn't for those LARPers who supported me when I first started playing.
Because there's a lot of that now, and it is quite an easy game to come in with that attitude of like, oh, this is my first time at Anvil and I know nothing. Like, it's such an easy game for that. Was it? Has the game like evolved into that, or was it always well designed enough that you could just be like, my character doesn't know anything?
I think it was all right. I mean, again, I was quite lucky in that I had a lot of support from a lot of people who had done LARPing for a long time. Not necessarily Empire, because Empire was so new. But yeah, I was surrounded by quite a lot of long-time LARPers. And one of the things that really helped me, and it's something I try and do nowadays, is I mean, I don't think I spoke very much at all the first couple of events because I was just so nervous, and it's like, oh, these scary important people, and there's just me being a little squire not knowing what I'm doing. My job at the events was I would help my group put their armor on for battle. My first two battles, I went in without any weapons, without any armor. I just went in, and my job was to collect the arrows and the broken shields, and give them back to the people who give them back to the archers. So I literally was just around collecting arrows, and those were my first couple of events, and I very much played it as I'm a squire. I don't have a sword, I don't have a shield, I'm literally just collecting arrows. And again, I'm kind of glad I did that because that's informed my character. But no, the person I think I need to thank the most for it all was Chris, who I believe is on the plot writing team now, but he played the original Archmage of Summer in the game.
Okay.
He was the first Archmage of Summer in Empire. He played in Urizen, and he played a character called Corvus. And due to background shenanigans and stuff, me and a couple of other people in our group we were summer mages. So obviously the first thing we did was let's go and chat to the Archmage of Summer. And obviously it was a lot easier to do that back in the day. And bless him, he was so sweet because he basically asked me, do you have something you want to do? Do you have a job? And I was a bit like, oh, I don't know. I'm new, still trying to figure everything out. And so what he would do is he would ask me to deliver messages across the field, because obviously he was a busy Archmage, he couldn't be there. So he would say, can you please tell this person who looks like this in the league camp, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, right. So go trotting off to the league camp, and obviously I didn't know anyone, so I was like, I'm looking for this person, apparently they look like this, and eventually I'd find them, and then I'd tell them the information, and they'd be like, great, can you go back and tell Corvus blah 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 blah. But it was really good because it helped me figure my way around the field. It helped me get to recognize and know people, and like influential people. These were like senators and stuff I was talking to. Didn't know at the time, but obviously eventually I figured it out. And also, I was delivering important information. I again didn't know how important it was, but it was important information. So I was slowly learning the game as I was delivering messages. And then obviously by sort of doing this job, Corvus eventually took me and a couple of others to an Eternal meeting, which again, back in the day was like a massive deal. So, and I was just like, oh, this is like my second event and I'm meeting an Eternal. I'll just stand in the corner and literally didn't say anything. I was so nervous, but it was such a cool experience. And yeah, like it helped build my confidence up, and like I say, sort of helped direct me to where I am today, playing an Archmage of Summer. So it's it's really, in terms of like storytelling, although that wasn't the intent or the direction I was going in, that it kind of just came out that way naturally. And I think that's one of the things of playing a long-term character, is seeing that character's storyline and how it develops and changes and which way it goes and so on.
Yes, since you beautifully segued us into this, so you're the current Archmage of Summer. So what is an Archmage for people who might not know anything? I totally know, obviously, but just in case people don't know.
Like this is not for us, like just
No, not at all. So Archmages we are essentially diplomats of the realms. So obviously there are the 6 realms of magic: spring, summer, autumn, winter, day and night. And obviously there are the Eternals, which are the magical beings of the realms. The Archmages act as essentially ambassadors to these beings, so we're allowed to interact with them. We have special abilities. One of them's called plenipotentiary, which basically means we can write a letter a season to one of these Eternals in our respective realms and have a chat with them and stuff. When an Eternal kicks off or does something we don't like, it's our job to deal with it. But also, if we want the Eternal to give us something or do something, we also have to be the ones to deal with it. It is a very fun but also very stressful job. Summer, I touch wood, as far as the winds have gone so far, the Summer realm is not on fire, and therefore I'm counting that as a win. But yeah, it's very much it's both a job IC and OC, in the sense that part of it is also giving game to other people. You are a gatekeeper. You have access to a whole portion of the game, and you are the one who sort of is able to ease plot regarding those Eternals to the player base. So it's it's very much a sort of balancing act of what do you want to do as you and you as a player and you as your character, but also being out of character aware. It's like you can't really hog the game. I mean, you can, but it's not considered kosher to do that.
So how much? So you only get to, you said one letter, right? So is that once every summit?
So once a season, you are able to send one plenipotentiary to one Eternal. So you obviously have to select which Eternal you want. And you might get a plenipotentiary back that just says, "No, I don't want to talk to you. Go away." You might get someone that says, "Oh, all these things you've asked for, sure, I can sort them out for you, but I want something in return." Most of the time, you'll get you'll get a opportunity for a meeting, which is called a parlay. Those usually happen in the Hall of Worlds, and they pop up. You'll see them if you look at the Winds of Fortune.
Okay.
But they do also happen in other circumstances as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a big mix of stuff. So like at E4, I had written previously to Maraud, and I'd asked him a couple of things. Was like, some people want to chat to you about some rituals, and I've got some things I want you. Do you want to come and have a chat? And at E4 in the Hall of Worlds, Maraud and a bunch of his heralds all rocked up, and we had a lovely group meeting where a bunch of people got to chat to Maraud. There were some kid mages who wanted to show off their magic to Maraud. It was great fun. Really, really good, fun little scenario. But also sometimes you can have meetings which are in the realm, well, the chambers of the realms, which are like small little encounters, and all sorts of things. So yeah, I love the Eternal game. It is so much fun. It's a part of the game I personally don't think is like any other part of Empire, but again, it's one of those parts of the game that you have to sort of help plot on the way to for people.
I can see how you're so busy though, because like
Yeah.
if you can only speak to one Eternal and you've only got one chance to summit, because it's like the Eternals are things that the entire Empire is. It's not just like, oh, it's just the generals that are interested in talking to them, or just the senators. So I imagine you've got a lot of people being like, oh, I want you to send something. Is that literally your entire game? People
And
come
a
up to you being
large
like, hey.
portion of my game is people coming up to me and saying, I want to talk to this Eternal for these reasons. Please can you write to them next? And I have to sort of weigh up the options of which Eternals do I want to chat to, which ones are perfectly happy at the moment and we don't want to disturb them, which ones are currently not happy at the moment and we really need to calm them down. It's very much I call it is a job where you are constantly spinning plates, and the idea is to keep all the plates spinning, and as long as none of them fall down, you're okay. You're never going to win at the game of Eternals. It's very much just keep the plates spinning and keep people happy, and that's the best you're going to do. Other people have different opinions. Some people are like, no, I want to focus only on this Eternal and screw the others and all that sort of thing, but that's not how I play it.
Yeah, because I can imagine you're like, oh yeah, you know what? It's not. I can imagine the generals might be like, you know what? We don't care if we upset this Eternal. Can you just do this? And you're probably like, I don't really want to do
Yeah,
that.
I mean, like, being in the realm of summer, the big one that everyone talks about, obviously, is Knights of Glory. And I'm sure there's going to be a collective groan from a bunch of people who are listening to this. But, one of the big things is obviously the generals want to use Knights of Glory as a ritual. And that was a whole thing where Eleonaris thought it was being overused and was like, you can have this thing only if you give me something in return. Stuff happened. She eventually got rid of Knights of Glory, and essentially we had to work on improving relations with Eleonaris again to get Knights of Glory back. We finally have it back, so the hard work paid off, but that was several seasons of really hard role play and hard work from not just me but like a bunch of people involved in summer plot to make that happen. But it's one of the things of the game. It is knowing you are doing stuff that is actively affecting the game world in one way or another. It's good fun.
I think like Eleonaris, when I read the wiki on her, I was like, this just sounds like Cersei Lannister, but in god form. Is there, because I know some of the other realms there, it's like these parlays and that can be quite scary. In Summer Realm, are you ever going in being like, we might not come out of here?
I've personally never experienced one like that. However, it is totally possible. Summer Realm stuff, it really depends on the mood of the Eternal. And again, they're all different. Eleonaris, she's known as being very fickle. So there's been some meetings where you rock up and she's like in the middle of a war council meeting, so it's all very intense. And there's other ones I've been to where the Summer Realm basically had a big feast, and it was all a bit of a it all seemed very nice until Jaehaerys decided to flip some tables and storm out, and then it all turned a bit soap opera-y. Meeting Jaehaerys recently was a really fun meeting because it was the first time he had been in the position he's in, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect when we went in, so it was a bit nerve-wracking. But that was very fun. It was like a formal like meeting a king or a prince, sort of throne room meeting, so that was very intense, but in a very sort of diplomatic way. And then you've got Maraud, who, like I say, just hops along into the Hall of Worlds, quite happy to hear about what you're up to and what's going on. And then there's my one of my out of character favorites is Rhiannos. I haven't met Rhiannos officially. I don't know if they have an NPC for Rhiannos the Eternal. But Rhiannos's heralds are a lot of fun. One of them sounds like Brian Blessed and goes around shouting adventure the whole time. Literally just screaming adventure in a Brian Blessed voice. It's brilliant. And also, funnily enough, played by Chris, who used to be Corvus, the original Archmage Summer. There is who I affectionately call the Crabmiral, who is Rhiannos's admiral, who comes out in massive crab armor. And again, it's all about adventure and fun stuff, and they're just a very fun bunch of heralds to interact with.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I think someone asked us that we did a stream not long ago, and someone asked like what Eternal that we would want to go, and I think I said Rhiannos because I was just like, it kind of suits my character. I like adventure because I don't have anything meaningful to say to any of the rest of them. But if I wanted to go on if I found some cool quest, then I would love to sit down and like froth with Rhiannos.
I do have plans to contact Rhiannos at some point in the future because it's been a while and I've got some interesting ideas for some fun adventures to send people onto. So maybe watch the space for coming events. I don't know.
That's a good point. So if you, so obviously, you have to go. Do you have to go as the Archmage, or can you just?
No.
Oh, right.
I don't have to go to any parlays or quests or anything that an Eternal sets. Obviously, if an Eternal requests you to be there, it's considered impolite to not go. But yeah, there's nothing saying I specifically have to go unless otherwise said. Generally, I've been to nearly all unless there's been... there was one meeting when Eleonaris was in a particularly bad mood, and I'd sent her like a letter to try and see if we could hash some things out and do a diplomacy. And she wrote back saying, not happy to meet you now, but I've set up a nice little feast for my heralds to like chat to if you want to chat to them. And I thought, from a diplomatic standpoint, I'm not going to go to this meeting because, the person I want to speak to is not there, and that would be a sign of weakness. So I'm going to not attend. So she's sending her retainers. I will send, air quotes, my retainers, and they can talk. So I basically sent a bunch of players who I thought would do well with chatting, and they got to go to the meeting, and I just asked them to report back to me. So yeah, it's very much sort of how you want to play the game, if you want to go to all the meetings or not, really.
So like being in your position, are you potentially at quite a high risk in certain situations then, because you're the one that is actually having to communicate with these Eternals, and it's maybe not always overly positive? As your character in any kind of risk? I mean, we've spoken about Eternals before, and I think these sound terrifying. Although the way you speak, this sounds really lovely and great, and I am still scared.
I mean, I think you've always got to think of them. These are incredibly powerful beings. They're not gods, but they can wield extreme power, and you've always got to be aware of that when interacting with them, and that how you interact with them will determine an outcome, and if you upset the Eternal, the outcome might be bad. So, for example, this was before I was Archmage. I got a position called Master of Ice and Darkness. It's a very dramatic,
That's a
hardcore
really,
name.
really cool title.
So the title was for a position in the newly built Summer College of Magic.
Mhm.
And the College of Magic had the Eternal Catherine Kane as a patron. And she had some particular favorite people she wanted to get the job. Then there's me, little, playing a 16-year-old, wanting to just try a little bit of ambition and be like, well, I'll stand for this position. It's not the end of the world if I don't win, blah, blah, blah. Ended up winning the job, which I was not expecting. But because I came completely out of left field and I wasn't involved with Catherine Kane, she then put a curse on the surrounding the college, saying that anyone who wasn't Varushkan, because the college is in Varushka, was going to have to battle through a blizzard to get to the college. So that was interesting, and so I got to role play. Came to the event with a fake streaming cold, pretending I'd fallen over in a snowdrift and stuff like that. And that was like a light thing, just because Conclave voted me into the job that she wanted someone else to get. Obviously it can be much, much more dramatic depending on how it goes. I have had assassination attempts on me, which is always a bit scary, but again, it's part of the job, I guess. I mean, it really depends, because summer is it's the realm of war, but it's also the realm of nobility and sort of kings and queens and all this sort of thing. So they're not so quick to things like say spring, which is a bit more chaotic and a bit more far reaching, I suppose. Hayak, he is the Eternal of wrath and vengeance in the summer realm. So obviously he's one you're like, don't really want to upset him if we can help it. But yeah, so it's one of those things of, it can go wrong, but part of the job of being an Archmage especially is knowing or understanding kind of how an Eternal ticks. I think that's one thing that I always say to people is, you've got to understand the nuances of an Eternal. So I've had people coming up to me plenty of times saying, can you go and speak to Rhiannos about building a navy or helping us with a navy? And on paper, that would make sense. Rhiannos is the Eternal of the sea. He loves sending, he helped with like the raid on Dubtraig and all this sort of thing, like adventure, high seas, huzzah, pirates, woo. But actually Rhiannos hates the concept of navies, because his whole thing, or their whole thing, is about the individual fleet, like the individual sailing ship or the individual ships that go forth and sort of strive against
trailblazing,
proper, the overwhelming terror of the sea, etc. So it's about knowing those nuances, and again, that's sort of what fun thing. I'll have someone come up to me and say, hey, I want to do this with this Eternal, and I have to sort of think about it and go, no, that won't work, they won't like it, and here's the reason why. So it's that sort of thing. One of my role play moments was I just agreed something with Catherine Kane, and this Wintermarker afterwards came up to me and started shouting at me, standing right in front of, shouting at me, Catherine Kane has sent heralds and ice giants to fight with the Jotun, and they're fighting against us. How can you be supporting her? Blah blah blah. And I had to sort of very calmly explain, like, no, the fact that she's sending all this stuff against us is a good thing, and let me explain to you why. And managed to completely calm the guy down and talk him down, and he kind of realized, oh, I guess actually, you do know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess that's built into that mechanic of only being able to, like, send one letter. Because, like, I guess if you could just, like, send infinite letters, people would just be just chance it and just, like, we'll ask him for this, and we'll ask this one for this, and this for this. But if you've only really got, like, one kind of shot, it kind of forces you as the Archmage to be like, no, maybe that won't work. Just be like, see it. Just we'll do it and see.
Yeah, and I mean, I do say one of the things I like about the Summer Realm particularly is there are little ways you can create interaction with Eternals without needing the plenipotentiary. So I'm going to plug it here because I think it's a really good thing.
Do it.
So I always recommend people, if you can, do the ritual Challenge the Iron Duke. It is a fantastic ritual. It's essentially you doing a ritual that pings through to the eternal Barrion, and Barrion is all about challenges and proving yourself and so on. And on an out of character level, it's a bit like sticking a big arrow above your head and saying, hello plot, please give me some plot, please. And what happens is the following season, a herald of Barrion will come and find you and will sit you down for a little interview and question you and your character about, like, what is it you want to do? What tell me about you. What is your thing? What are you aiming to achieve in life, etc., etc.? What are your ambitions? What are your goals? And then they'll go and have a chat to some of your character's friends and be like, tell me what you think about this person. Tell me about them. And they'll get all this information, and then they'll go trotting back off to the Summer Realm, and then they will craft a mission or a quest or a challenge specifically for your character. And it's brilliant because it's not just like fighting monsters and stuff, although I have seen a lot of people have like defeat this big scary monster. People who are non-com can get non-com challenges, which I think is really good, because I think a lot of people think Summer Realm, I've got to be able to fight to do anything, and it's not. And again, the challenge is always tailored specifically to your character or what your character is trying to achieve. So I had a friend who did it last year, and he was sort of saying, I feel a bit responsible for not being able to stop the Highborn who made the breaking of the mirrors in Savos happen. I feel like I should have been able to stop this. So they were like, I want to sort of make amends with the League. So he decided to do a ritual with Challenge the Iron Duke to do that. And how it ultimately went was they were given a challenge to lead a mission of Leaguers as a Highborn to go and gather a bunch of mysterious masks and in a little skirmish mission quest type thing. I won't say how it went or what happened and blah blah blah, but yeah, and that was it. It was like, you have to work with these Leaguers and sort of do something for the League as a part of reparations, and the fallout of that, and this is the other great thing about Challenge the Iron Duke rituals, is they nearly always have a knock-on effect. They will nearly always cause something to happen. You'll get a cool item, you'll get a cool story, but it will nearly always connect into other plot happenings. So even though you think your Challenge the Iron Duke is over, a couple of seasons down the line, something might trigger and you'll be like, this thing is happening and I've got this thing related to that because of my challenge. It's just, it's a really lovely way of doing it. But the whole point of Challenge the Iron Duke on an Eternal aspect is that all the Eternals of the Summer Realm will know the result of that challenge, regardless of whether you succeed, regardless of whether you fail. They know how it went. So it's almost like, again, like a little post-it note that gets put with your character for when
they
an
know
Eternal,
you. Yeah,
they know you,
well.
and they'll be like, oh, you're the one who did this thing. So yeah, you get
I
some fun stuff out of
love
it.
that. Oh, I love that, especially as a Dawnist changeling. I'd
Yeah.
be all over that. Also, I have nothing really to do currently.
Oh, I highly recommend doing Challenge the Iron Duke.
Yeah.
Then, it's great fun, and yeah, I always say to people to do it. It's such a good ritual. It's just, yeah, it's so nice. And yeah, it's plot for you. Like, who doesn't want a bit of plot just for them?
Yeah. Especially if it like sparks plot for other people. Like you say, if the example you gave with the leaguers, you're just like gives you something to be like, right, okay, now I have to go talk to all these leaguers and
Yeah, and he's now got a load of friends in the league. That he wouldn't necessarily have interacted before. So yeah, it's great, and he had to be the one to lead the mission and all this sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fun ritual, and it's not very expensive to cast either,
really?
which is
Yeah.
also helpful.
Yeah. You mentioned Conclave earlier. So like Archmage, where do you sit in like the hierarchy? If there, I don't really know much about the Magic game. Where do you sit in like the hierarchy of like the Magic game type
So
thing?
it's in Conclave. So I will say there's been some changes to Conclave literally recently. So I can't say how dramatically it's going to change until we get in the field. But generally, Conclave is mostly run by the Grand Masters. Now, the Grand Masters are the heads of the various orders, and I kind of describe the orders as a bit like sort of like political parties, I suppose. Each group has a different focus on the role of magic in the Empire. So you've got the Rod and Shield, which focus on like battle magic and military rituals and all that sort of thing. You've got the Shuttered Lantern, which is about trying to like protect the Empire, or use shields and stuff and just kind of hide things, but also kind of uncover secrets and things. It's all sorts of different ones about that. Sevenfold Path is about virtue, and it's in conjunction with magic and using magic in a virtuous way. So generally there's a group for everyone depending on what sort of angle you're going at. And the Grand Masters decide who gets to speak and who gets to ask questions, and then when it gets decided who's voting, we all vote. An Archmage doesn't really have any precedence in Conclave unless they're asked for an opinion on a particular Eternal of the Realm. Because of the Conclave changes, the Grandmasters now also have the ability they're the only ones who can put forward a declaration in Conclave. Now, a declaration, I would say it's comparable to putting something through the synod. So it's sort of like making a statement. So the conclave thinks casting this ritual is a good idea and we should cast this ritual today. That would be something put through conclave, and that would be something a grandmaster would put up. So it gets discussed, and then everyone votes on it, on whether or not that should pass or not. As an Archmage, my new power in Conclave is I can raise a declaration about Eternals.
Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And in regard to whether we put them under something called amity or enmity. And amity and enmity basically means, are they a friend of the Empire or are they an enemy of the Empire? And by declaring them a friend or enemy gives additional changes to the Eternals. So an Eternal under enmity, who is an enemy of the Empire, basically it gives them less access to the Empire. Like they can still do things, but it's a lot harder for them to do things in the Empire, to do shenanigans and do some wibbly magic and stuff like that. It's why you don't see Agromant just dumping cannibalism rituals left, right, and center. He can't do that very easily because he's an enemy to the Empire. Whereas amity obviously means, hey, we're friends and we want to work with you some more. And so what that does is it means the Eternal has larger access to the Empire and can basically pretty much dump a ritual where they want, or do things that essentially almost without permission. They can just be like, well, we're friends, so it's cool for me to do this, right?
Yeah.
So for example, in the recent Winds of Fortune that's popped out, Lofir has asked to be put under Amity, and he's been asked to put under Amity so he can then dump a big ritual on the Empire that's gonna ruin all the farms in the Empire, and he can't do that unless he's declared a friend. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's again, it's very much a diplomatic thing. I think a lot of people view being an Archmage as you do a lot of rituals, you do a lot of magic. You know, you've got the big magic stick and you've got the special regalia that lets you do certain ritual type stuff. I'm gonna be perfectly honest, I don't have time to do rituals.
To do magic.
As an Archmage.
Play a wizard.
I don't mind
have
that.
time to do magic.
I don't mind that. You know, I'm not a big fan of standing in a ritual for 10 minutes trying to get a ritual to happen. So I usually will hand off my Archmage regalia to other people who want to go and do rituals. It's much more about the diplomacy and trying to earn things for the Empire while not causing disrupt to the realms. It's really good fun. If you're into politics, you know, it's a good thing to go for. But yeah, don't expect you're going to have a ton of time to do a ton of rituals.
Like obviously people reiterate that they're not gods, but like that's such an important thing because you can then, because it's like you say, it's like the whole game is political, you know, even at every level it's political, and if you had them as gods, then there's no, you know, that there's no negotiating with them, because then, you know, that they want something from the Empire, because they're a little bit, I've described them more like devils and demons from like D&D. Or...
I've heard people refer to them as like sort of like the Unseelie Court, like Fae and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they're very similar to like if you're familiar with the Elder Scrolls games, they have the Daedra, which are like so some of them are good, some of them like humans, some of them hate humans, some of them want to enslave, but they can't just jump onto the mortal realm. They can't just do what they want. They have to be like, oh, I'm gonna have to go in and influence some of these to be cultists so they can do my stuff for me, you know.
And I think it's also you always have to remember the Eternals have their own agendas. They have their own goals, they have their own things that they want, and also you've got the other nations in the game and the the other factions also interacting with Eternals and trying to earn their favor and trying to achieve certain things with them. So it's I remember one, and this was I think the first meeting I had way back in the day, as I said, with Eleonaris, and we arrived in this chamber with Eleonaris, and there was a Druge orc there and I think it was Jotun orc there, and they were trying to earn Eleonaris's favor. So they had like so the Druge had like, oh, we've got this orichalcum, you know, you love orichalcum, you know, give us all the shinies. And the Druge orc was like, no, like we're really fighty and we'll fight in your name and blah blah blah, you know, give us all your shinies in that respect. And what eventually happened was Creed in our group, he stood up, and he's a big changeling, you know. He's one of those people who'll be quiet for a long time, and then when he gets up he can really go for it. He stood up and he walked up to the Druge and he said, you shut up. And then he walked to the other, so not these particular words, he said something a little more sweary, and said, you shut up, to the Jotun, and then turned to Eleonaris and said, I don't need your magic, I don't need your boons, we're going to go and destroy these two without any help from you, because we don't need it. And like there was a moment of silence, and we were all like, oh no. And then she suddenly started laughing and then said, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, that you don't need my help. And she basically then was like, you know, cool, I'm on your side, you know, I don't care about the shiny gifts. I don't care about this. I want to hear you standing up for
Yeah.
yourselves.
And
then
That's so
and
cool.
then everyone exhales. Because-
yeah, it was a proper like moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's it. Is any of those things could have worked, but the thing that piqued her interest the most was, oh yeah, I like it when people can sort of stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah.
And it's what I was saying earlier about Eternals have their own nuances and their own like ways of working, and it's just figuring out and picking up on those little details.
Right, Scarlett. We went to our first player event. We went to every event at Empire our first year, and when we finished, people were, oh, you go to player events, and we were like, yeah. And there was a lot to choose from. We went to History and Virtue, which is your player event. Now, like this might be a massive question, and hope we might be able to like unpack it slowly. But what goes into being like from the start of like I think I might want to run a player event for Empire to actually running a player event. What is that process like?
So I will be honest, I've run a couple of player events before. I think for me, one of the things I love about player events is you get the opportunity to do something you wouldn't be able to do in Anvil, and that you get to. I personally like to create the world that Empire is in, to have a moment where you can feel like you are legitimately 100% in this place in the Empire, and even for just a second have that feeling of complete and utter immersion. That's my personal goal when it comes to player events. I've run a couple of social ones. So when I first came up with the idea for History and Virtue, I was trying to find a place of, all right, I want to run an event set within my chapter in the game. So in character, my character has gone and created his own chapter. And I was like, I want to bring that chapter to life. I want that place to feel real. And I want people to come and visit it, because to be quite honest, there aren't a ton of Highguard events. There's a lot of Dornish ones, which is completely understandable, quite a few Marcher ones. But yeah, not a lot of Highguard ones. And this isn't dissing any of them. Just saying most of them are in like churches and stuff, or castles, which again makes total sense.
Yes.
Really good locations. But I wanted something that had a certain level of gravitas to it. I live in Bath, and I kind of thought, just as a casual thing, I was like, let's just get in contact with the Roman Baths. You know, they can only say no, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, when they got back to me, they were like, they told me how much it would cost and all this, and I sort of sat there and thought, it's actually quite doable. You know, it's like price wise, like this could be like, could we actually run an event in the Roman Baths, which is probably the most highborn location you could set it.
The location
Definitely.
is beautiful. The location is something else.
So yeah, like I say, it's that kind of feeling of immersion. Yeah, the very first player event I ran, although I was still organizing History and Virtue beforehand, it was a little player event called Mark of the Liberator, and it was a freeborn event. And I ended up, what I did was I hired a place that does Moroccan events for weddings. So you hire out the marquee, they set dress it all for you, and it was a really tiny little event, but it was a bunch of people's first event, and it was literally, you walk into this marquee and suddenly you're in the Brass Coast. Like, the vibe was all there. It was, you know, I thought it was amazing, and everyone just kept saying like, I have never felt so immersed just stepping into that location. And that's sort of what I wanted again from History and Virtue. So yeah, the idea was, okay, the Roman Baths is this ruin of this old chapter house in Bastion, and then Pump Room, which is obviously the Regency part of the location, is the newly built remodernized version where we've moved in as this
Mhm.
new chapter.
Mhm.
And that's why I kind of came up with the idea of history and virtue. You know, we want to tie in the idea of the Empire's history, but tie it in with the subject of virtue and create kind of like a discussion point. I wanted an event where people could, yeah, like I say, feel like they're in the world and do what people did back in the day. You know, in the Roman times, they would gather and they would discuss politics and fun things and
Fits
whatever
in
was going on.
perfectly with Empire, right?
It just felt so right. And I think in a way it sort of summed it all up for me. The first time I ran
Mhm.
it was at the end of the night, the event manager of the baths, who was sort of like making sure the behind the scenes stuff was working well, he said to me, I had a look from the balcony down into the baths, and when I saw everyone in costume, to me that looked more like how I would imagine the Roman Empire to look, with all the different people, all the different outfits and so on from across the empire. Um, he said that to me is what it would have looked like, better than any reenactment I've ever seen.
It was probably
Oh wow.
probably. I mean, that's some
Like
praise because
he was genuinely like quite taken
yeah.
aback by and to me it's like, you know, if that's how, you know, a historian viewed it
Mm.
as like part of the Roman Empire, to me, you know,
Oh, yeah, I
I think
mean,
there are elements of the Roman Empire in Empire for those exact
it
reasons.
makes
Yeah.
complete
Yeah.
sense as well because I guess the Roman battle, like you have people from all over, like you
Yeah.
said, coming to the baths. Like you wouldn't have the local Brits, you know, just like swanning in there. Yeah, you'd have
It
people from all
honestly,
over.
it would be all over, and like the, you know, the artifacts they found in the Roman baths are from, you know, the curse tablets with writing on has writing from all over. They found artifacts where they're like, this is from this part of the empire, this coin is from that part of the empire. It's and it is that kind of melting pot of people from all over who, you know, because Bath was such a cultural hub
Yeah,
back in the day, you would have had people from all over. You would have legit had Roman tourists and
yeah,
stuff, and merchants and so on. And it was very much that vibe. I had one person who came to the event and they said to me, the moment they stepped out into the Roman bath area, and you know, that sort of feeling you get of stepping into a piece of legit history, and
Yeah.
they sort of had a moment where they teared up a little bit because they were like, I'm playing my character in this place which feels so real because it is real. And it was just sort of one of those moments where you get a bit like personally
yeah.
choked up about it.
Yeah,
It
like you
was,
said, it
yeah.
is real. It's not like
Mm,
yeah, I mean, like Imagineers can do amazing things at theme parks, but it's fake, and on a level
mm,
you know it's fake. But that like that bathroom, like just on the
mm,
bottom, and it's the way that it's all open, and it's
mm,
like open air, like as well
yeah,
at night time. But you're undercover, but it's still open air, and you kind of look out at night, and it's obviously like the steam coming
yeah.
off the baths as well, and
And you've
because
got the flames lit and the flambeaux, and um, I remember one of the people in my group, he was standing and he looked up, and you can see the spire of Bath Abbey in that open air roof area. You could see it just peeking over the top, and he sort of said, yeah, this is what Bastion is meant to look like,
yeah,
this
this is
place with these giant towers standing up around in the distance, and just, yeah, just that sort of, I always say it's like a goosebumps sort of spine tingly feeling of
Yeah.
like full immersion in that moment.
oh, it's something else, and because it is in that, it's obviously the standing room is like semicircle around the
Mm,
baths, and for a social event, it's so perfect because obviously you can't hear what
mm,
anyone's saying, and they're all in their little groups, but they feel so close. Like you
yeah,
see because there's nothing between you and the group across the bath apart from the bath, so you get
Yeah.
a perfect view of the groups talking, but you have no idea what they're talking
Yeah.
about.
It
Yeah.
was so like you could just tell there was like so many secrets being told and things there, just like standing there looking across and just seeing like Oliver just said, like, you know, certain people chatting together and maybe like slipping off out just slightly out of sight. And you're just like, oh, what's happening there? What are they
Yeah.
talking about?
And
And then yeah.
yeah, and you know, the Roman baths have their own sort of like they have like sort of like back rooms where they have what would have once been the sauna and what would have once been the changing rooms. And you know, I as sort of the host was sort of doing laps of the baths just to make sure everyone was okay, and I would sort of poke my head in, and you just see people like quietly sitting there having a, you know, a quiet silent conversation just out of the way in these little back rooms and things. And it's those sorts of things where it's like, yeah, this is where the this is where, like, yeah, as you say, the secrets happen or the politics happen. And I just think it's so effective because yeah, that's what would actually happen in Empire. You know, you would get all these people in these locations and they would discuss whatever it is they're discussing.
Yeah, like I like you just said, it was those like little like rooms off of it that I ended up off at one point, and I was like, wow, this seems like completely private. It's just me and this other person, but everything else is just happening behind us there, and they can't hear us. They have got no idea what's happening. And we're able just to, like, you know, sneak back out of there quite nicely, or just, you know, sneak behind one of the pillars. And it was just very much like, as a first ever player event, it was absolutely incredible to kind of like
I'm so
experience
glad.
all that. And
It was ideal for us, I think, as well, because obviously the thing about when you're at Empire, there's lots of people, and there's lots of people, like, you know, we were talking about your job being Archmage, like like once timing goes in, unless I've got an absolutely important thing to say to you, we're probably not going to have, you know, a role play for an hour, you know, just like, oh, you know, well, what do you think of that? What do you think of that? Because everyone's got things to do. What I loved about History and Virtue is you went and I talked to characters, people I speak to out of character a lot, but because they're in certain parts of the game that I'm not, when timing comes, I never see them, you know?
Yeah. And that's why I love player events that have plot. I think plot driven player events are great. I'm a big fan of social player events for that exact reason, because you do get the chance to have those conversations with people. You do get to, you know, just sit down with someone and have a discussion. And again, it's one of those things why, you know, partly why I really enjoy History and Virtue, especially in terms of the subject matter, is the whole idea is this is a space in which you can discuss this stuff. You can discuss the history of the Empire. You can discuss what virtue means. You can discuss how it all ties in together with people you wouldn't necessarily meet or interact with, but suddenly you've now got a connection with someone. So when you do meet them in the field, you can be like, oh, hey, we had that discussion, or oh, that thing you brought up was really interesting. I hadn't thought about that before.
yeah,
It's a really lovely opportunity to do those things. You know, I saw little moments where people were doing someone came up to me and was like, oh, this person has just said something which I feel might be a little bit heretical, and considering I'm not a priest, you might want to send some priests to go and deal with that. So I sort of scurried around, found a couple of priests, was just like, just so you know, this is what I've been informed. You might want to look into that. And then sort of next thing I know is across the baths, I see this contingent of priests all surrounding this particular person, having a stern conversation. And it's again, that's the other thing I love, is because of the nature of the event, you sort of have this veneer of polite society. Like, I've never seen, certainly not at the moment, I haven't yet seen anyone have a full-on screaming match at the event. I have like pre-warned the event management people, like, that might happen. I don't know, it could happen. But it's this sort of thing of, oh, we've been invited to this event, we have to be on our best behavior, but at the same time, you know, we're not afraid to have the stern discussions if we need to, kind of thing.
And it's funny because you brought up like the Roman Empire. I can imagine that would be the same type of
Yes.
culture, right? It's just like, oh, aren't we, especially in this savage land or whatever? It's like, aren't we civilized? You know, and really, no.
Yeah,
Not really.
absolutely.
They're talking
And
barbarous stuff.
yeah, exactly. And it's just really fun. And like I say, it gives you excuses to have reasons to interact with people. So like there was this one person that was playing I think it was a lute or something. It was an instrument, and they sung beautifully. And so I went up to them afterwards and was like, "Oh, can I commission you for a song for the coming summit?" And they were like, "Oh, yes, that absolutely." And you know, I might not have like come across them if they weren't there performing their song. So it's all those little things like that. And then you get the fun thing, obviously, of the donation museum later on when you go upstairs to the pump room, which is its own separate form of shenanigans.
Just the level of how, you know, how good the role play is when you just stick a load of just items and just say, hey, it's this is the Dornish crown, this is this, and just getting people just role playing, like, you know, you just kind of, you're bumbling along, you're like, oh yeah, what's that, and two highborn are in deep conversation of whether this painting or whatever it is virtuous or not. And they're like deep in it, you know.
It was seeing how each nation reacted differently, and like Oliver said, like seeing the highborn like doing that, and we were like sitting down eating at this point, and somebody who was with us, who was from Dawn, just came over with one of the pieces from the museum. Was like, "Oh, look at this!" I'm like, "You're not supposed to take that. You're supposed to leave it over there."
Like, oh,
I mean, like,
it's cursed. Some freeborn just goes, "Ah,
oh, pick up this curse thing. I mean that was sort of the idea of the donation museum. So obviously, like I say, I like to do social events that don't have specific plot stories that are happening, but I sort of wanted something that could generate game if and when people wanted to. And it's the sort of thing where if you want to interact with it, you can. If you don't want to interact with it, you could just ignore it, and that's fine. But part of the reason of creating it was I sort of sat down and I thought there are so many interesting items and backstory things that people have in the game and don't have the opportunity to really show people, or, you know, if they do, it's only a few select people. Wouldn't it be cool to have a thing where people can actually bring their cool item or their backstory magic sword or whatever and be able to actually show it off a bit? And so that was sort of the original idea of the donation museum, was like an excuse to show your cool stuff and maybe have a little bit of a story about it. And I mean, this is all on the players who came along. Everyone completely ran with it and was like, I want to put forward this cursed sword. I want to put forward this painting that, you know, someone else was like, I want to put forward this crown. Can you put it in as anonymous, please? And all this sort of stuff.
the
bloody crown.
I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
And yeah, as you say, the way people interacted, the way the different nations interacted with it was part of the fun. You know, I had someone come up to me and be like, you know, Luke, I'm so angry about the crown, you know, tell me about the crown. And me being highborn, I was like, what? Oh, you mean the Crown of Dawn? Yeah, you know, I thought that was a really interesting piece someone put forward. And they're like, no, we've been looking for that forever. Do you know if it's real or verified? It's like, well, the piece of paper that the archivists wrote says that they're not sure, but it's from that time period. So, you know, completely not getting the significance of this artifact, while obviously all of Dawn are sort of running around with their hair on fire.
Yeah,
we had
all different opinions, because I mean, it's just like I think for a couple of us Dornish, we were just like, well, start, it's too small, it can't possibly, and also if it was the Dornish crown, the whole place would surely be on fire by now, and there would be a riot. So everyone seems calm, so therefore it can't be, you know.
Yeah, and that's it. Is, you know, it's people taking that level of game and just running with it, and being able to play with it and just sort of, and that's what I love, is it's the level of role play that comes out of it. But yeah, I'm really glad you guys enjoyed the donation museum and the shenanigans it brought forward.
It does. It creates game, like I said. It does create game. Now, obviously, like PD are very much like, because obviously it's way better to talk about this stuff in character than it is like on the forums on Facebook, and obviously PD encourage that. So because people say sanctioned events, like what's the do you have to be like, do you have to obviously just go to PD and be like, hey, I want to run an event? Is there I'm assuming there's a process of them.
So it's different depending on the kind of event you want to run.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it's changed recently or not. I don't believe so, but this is just me covering my back in case it has. But I basically dropped Matt P a line and was like, hey, I want to run this event in the Roman Baths. Want to do XYZ. Is that cool? And it's a social event, so there's no formal plot. And he was like, yep, totally fine, no issues, go ahead. If you're doing a plot driven event, so one I helped crew with recently was called the Wild Hunt, and that was one that had like a specific storyline to it where there might be more severe ramifications that could affect the game world at the mainline events. That you have to send through to Matt P to get a formal approval of, and that you have to send through like plot documents and an explanation of the story you're doing, with the idea being that the plot team can run through it and make sure what you want to do doesn't go against what they're doing in the game. Like, you don't want to introduce a new Eternal, for example.
Exactly.
You don't want to have a thing act the way it shouldn't act, and then that confuse people when they then go into the main game and be like, well, this is how this acted, so blah blah blah.
Or have like, oh yeah, we've just destroyed a Valorn heart, and the PD are like, no, you didn't.
No, you didn't. Yeah, and that's it. It's making sure those things don't happen. With social events, because it's because it's a social and there's no severe plot, you don't really need to go through all that. One thing that you do need to take into account is that they do ask that you don't make any like stern decisions. Like, essentially, like, if someone comes along as like, I want you to vote for me for this thing, the idea is, don't like agree to that sort of game in the field, but like you can at least discuss it.
I get
if
that.
you want.
Like
it's that
if
sort of thing.
like if half the generals happen to be at a player event and they're like, yeah, we're gonna do this, and you've like totally that should have been done at military council.
Exactly, and it's those sorts of things they ask you, and that's very much part of the social contract of being part of the game.
What I really liked about, like you say, the you've gone on about, there's not too many kind of Highguard ones. I really like, there's probably a place for like those mini anvil events, but I really like the idea of being like, oh, this is a Highguard centric event, this is a league centric event. So you can kind of like, then if you look at your load of player events and it's not just they're all just like mini anvils, it's like, oh yeah, I'm quite interested in Highguard, or I'm interested in the league, I might go to this league event and see what that's all about, or I might go to this Dornish event and see what that's all about. And especially
and it's a good way to get an idea of like the cultural identity of that particular nation and stuff.
Gives you that freedom to do it, like you said, because like Anvil is great, but it's like the idea is it's like a summit and it's kind of neutral ground, and we're all in just like canvas tents, so we have to kind of imagine what Dawn is like back home, and I guess with the player events you get to be like, oh, let's bring Dawn to life, or let's bring Highguard to life. That's what I really liked about it.
And again, that's sort of why I was like, well, let's see if we can do the Roman Baths, because that feels like what Highguard should be like. There are other Highguard events that do occur. There's one, 7 Hours of Virtue, which is in a deconsecrated church. So you're doing it essentially in the building of a church, and the next day they hire out a Victorian steam baths So you have like a vintage steam bath to do the whole cleanliness thing. So again, it's very much how you want to sort of play it.
Yeah.
But again, it's that sort of thing. I wanted something that didn't feel quite so churchy or quite so much like a castle, because to me I'm like, oh well, Dawn has castles, so I'll let Dawn have the castles. So,
some of them are a little bit easier, I imagine, right? Like Dawn with the castles and the marches is just like the English countryside or the Scottish countryside or the Welsh countryside is pretty much what you'd imagine the marches to be like, I guess.
I would recommend, if you want to do a really good marcher themed game, I would highly recommend Good Leaf Games. They usually run between, I think it's event 3 and event 4, and it's 100% marcher vibes. You can go as a non-marcher, but it is like you sort of have to, it's like going into another culture and immersing yourself for a weekend, and you're sort of like, don't really understand this, but I'm having fun, so that's the main thing. There's and that's it. There's all sorts of games out there, loads of different player events, all with different vibes depending on what you want to go for, really. There's fighting ones, there's social ones, there's horror ones, all sorts. It's just kind of down to the imagination of the player base, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, what I really loved about History and Virtue was the fact that the atmosphere itself, it felt like a very relaxed atmosphere, relaxed enough that you were able to have those in-character conversations that sometimes you can't find the time on the field to always necessarily do. But even with that relaxed atmosphere, you never forgot that it was a Highguard event, and just every so often you would be, well, I'm speaking about myself personally here. Every so often I'd be like, careful what I'd say, because I don't know who's listening as people are walking past, and I'm like, I don't want to accidentally commit any kind of heresy while I'm here.
and that's very much like the vibe I want, with the actual baths. I don't obviously need to do any set dressing or anything because it's just perfect the way it is, but in the pump room I very much try and just put little elements to make it feel highborn. So there's wash bowls everywhere, there's the altar on the stage with all the paragons and exemplars that we look to on display. There's a consecration on the room. We have little signs saying this area is consecrated and stuff. Just those little elements to sort of just have people be like, oh yeah, we're in this place, it's a highborn place, and I've got to kind of be aware of it.
Yes. What I loved is that, like, even though, so we moved, obviously we were in the section with the bath to start off with, and then we moved upstairs afterwards. What I loved is that the people there running the actual baths themselves were quite happy for small groups to come back to the baths and do some little like private photo shoots. That opportunity just doesn't really happen to be able to do that.
Well, that's the thing. So that was actually the first time we've been able to do that, and I'm really glad the baths let us do that. And we've sort of said, can we do that again in the future? And they've been very chill about it, said, yep, that's absolutely fine. But yeah, who doesn't want some really atmospheric photos of themselves in kit in the Roman baths, surrounded by steam baths coming up and the flames from the flambeaux and 2,000-year-old columns,
Oh yeah, just like looking out into the distance over the baths and just being like, oh, what are they thinking over there?
And again, it goes back to that whole vibe of, I always like to feel like, you have that moment of feeling like you're in something like, I don't know, Game of Thrones or whatever, where you're just like all this sort of like political discussions happening, and as someone walks by everyone sort of side eyes you and kind of quiets down the conversation for a minute or whatever. It's brilliant, and I love it. And yeah, to me it's creating that real world for people.
Yes, definitely, it really did do that. Like I very quickly forgot that there was an actual entrance into this building and a world outside this building. I very
right in the middle
quickly
of
forgot
as well.
Yeah,
right?
all these people around, and I just like I blanked them out. They were walking past windows when we were eating, but totally blanked them out because I was in Highguard. I wasn't in Bath. I was in Highguard at this point.
Yeah, and again, I think that also attests to just everyone's commitment to the role play while they're in it. You know, I remember walking by, and we had one table where we had this massive map of the Empire, which I put out, and I walked by, and the table was surrounded by people all leaning over the table and pointing at the map and discussing like various, you know, well, you know, the Druge are going here, and I think this should happen and stuff like this. Well, what are we going to do there? And again, it was just that sort of feeling of, yeah, you know, all these different topics are happening all at once, and it's just, there's just something really amazing about that, and just really effective. And yeah, like again, going back to the donation museum, you know, one of the donations is a model ship, and the little piece of paper said, oh, you know, this is a model of the Basilisk's daughter, Emperor Barabbas's flagship. Now, that probably wouldn't mean much to anyone except some highborn players who know that and go, oh, that's interesting, you know. But then, you know, you've got other nations who go, oh, don't know much about that, but that sounds quite cool. Might look into that later on in the future. And it's those little elements which, when you get into the main game, at some point something will happen, or you'll come across a bit of plot, and you'll get a little ping in the back of your mind to be like, oh, that I know something about that. I picked up some information about, and that's where you then feel like, again, it's a whole world, in that you've sort of picked up information elsewhere, and then you've brought it to this new location, and it's relevant and useful.
Yeah, I bet you feel lucky with Empire players in general running that type of event. Because I was actually thinking about History and Virtue, because I was watching a YouTube video, and it was some people in the States that are LARPers, and they were talking about they went to this LARP for the first time, and they called it a European style LARP, where, and basically what they were describing is how we do it. They weren't talking about the Nordic system; they were talking about how we do it at Empire. And they were like, "Oh, it was great, but like the second day we woke up and we're having fun, but we were just like, because it's all player led. We were like, oh, what do we do now?" And there was like hundreds of players being like, what should we, you know? And I'm like, I can't imagine Empire players doing that, because it's like literally, you know, obviously you gave us the baths, and you just, you know, we're just in there in kit, and it's just, we just go, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it again, it really depends on the players, because I do know people who are like, oh, I don't like player events, or rather, I don't like social events because I don't like that there's no plot. And you know, that's a fair enough opinion to have.
Yeah.
You know, some people do like having a plot to chase. I very much prefer socials in the sense of, I like being able to do those conversations. I like having those emotional, character driven conversations. To me, having social events gives me the opportunity to evolve my character. You know, we in the real world don't exist in just like one vacuum. We're constantly evolving by the conversations we have with people, no matter how big or small they might be. We're not always affected by just the big things in the world. And to make Empire feel more real, you do need those simple little conversations, or those intense emotional conversations. There was a beautiful little intimate moment where I was sitting having dinner, and I was eating, I think it was my fish and chips. I was eating fish and chips. and next to me was a Dornish character called Jasper. And next to Jasper was a highborn character called Oliver. And Luke and Oliver are good friends. We do a lot of stuff at Empire. Don't really know Jasper at Empire very well, but I know the player of Jasper very well. Lovely person. Anyway, I was eating my dinner, and I just glance over, and I notice that Oliver and Jasper are holding hands quite tenderly. And I sort of side eye and just kind of say as Luke, oh, like, you know, you two seem close. How long have you two known each other? And they sort of look at each other and little coyly, and they'd be like, oh, about 10 minutes. And Luke just sort of gives like this sort of side smile and then kind of glances deliberately down at the held hands. It's just like, oh, it just goes back to eating. And that was it. You know, it was a tiny little moment, but it was one of those sort of moments that, again, it's all character driven with our three characters and how we all interact in that moment.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, okay, well, now Luke has this information about these two. But, you know, how does he feel about this? What does he think of it? And it's all those little tiny interactions, which to me makes your character a real person.
Yeah, it is almost like a different game, though, isn't it? To say like I mean, we found this. I think we were like ready to jump into LARP. It was still maybe a little bit overwhelming jumping in straight away, but
it
like
always
through,
is.
but through like TTRPGs, you get the people that are like. I mean, a lot of us start out playing D&D, like, oh, here's a quest. I'm playing a paladin. He believes this, and go. But we got to the stage. We actually had a game. We tried it out at one point where there was just the 4 players, and we didn't have a DM. We were just like, should we just have a conversation?
Yeah.
And we literally just started laughing. As our characters, we literally there was no DM to be like, oh, this is happening, that's happening. We literally just talked as our characters, but not everyone kind of discovers that. So I can totally get some people being like, oh, what? I just come and I just talk, you know, and no one's gonna come up and be like, you need to go on this quest to save this person, and here's the game in front of you. You know, it's quite a unique thing, but I'd love it. I really do.
I'm really glad. It's you know, it's nice to know people really appreciate the game and sort of, you know, you always put something on and you kind of sit there going, oh, I hope people like it. I mean, a couple of us, myself included, do have ideas for a plot-driven event at some point.
Nice.
But that's going to be a very different style event, and purposefully so. It's not going to mean I'm going to stop doing History and Virtue. I'm going to keep running it because I now have a deal with the Baths, so they've been very lovely about it.
Nice.
And very sweet because, you know, when you rock up to them and you're like, hi, I know you normally host weddings and the occasional Jane Austen themed event. How do you feel about wizards and orcs? But yeah, they were very, very sweet about it. And once we did it the first time, they kind of got what we were doing.
The staff seemed like really cool with it, and you were saying that they were like you said, they obviously came to you and was like, oh, and you were like, it's feasible, because really, for the price of the event and the LARP, we obviously went to Bath, and I'm just like, quite honestly, like the price of us just coming on a normal day and getting just to see the baths isn't that far away from your entire event being able to do that and then eat and then go upstairs and obviously also LARP at the same play a LARP game at the same time.
And that's one of the things I sort of say to people, because again, there are plenty of other social events out there, and I do admit, obviously, History of Virtue is a little bit more on the pricey end, but that's because you're paying for the venue, you're paying for the location, and I think when you're kind of at the event, you realize why you're paying for the venue. But yeah, I always sort of have to say I think it's about half the ticket price. Normally you would get into the Roman Baths as like a tourist on a normal day. It would be surrounded by hundreds of other tourists, you know, jostling about, taking pictures, etc. And suddenly, instead, you're getting, you know, a good chunk of time in the baths to yourselves, doing role play and, you know, getting cool pictures and getting cool experiences, plus food and drink. It's just one of those things where you're like, yeah, you know what, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like,
go on, sorry, Rowan.
I was just gonna say, like, History and Virtue, for me anyway, completely has helped prepare me for E1 this year, because this time I really want to go for a hat at E1.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how to approach this in character, because at Empire there's so much going on, and to try and like pitch things to people and speak to them and get that advice in such a short period of time is difficult. And history and virtue actually gave me an opportunity to go around, to speak to people and to ask advice and to pitch it and to practice this sort of thing ready. And it made me go, like, driving away from it, I was like, okay, no, I am so ready for E1. I know exactly what I'm doing, and I know exactly who I'm speaking to first to make this happen.
I'm so glad. That's it, isn't it? It's about sort of the social events are very much about aiding your character and helping you, like I say, develop your character and be able to, I did a lot of my first experiences doing public speaking at player events by reading speeches out at player events, and now, like, I love public speaking. I think it's great fun, and I can do it. I can do it at an actual Empire event in front of a bunch of people, which I wouldn't have been able to do before. I wouldn't have had the confidence to do it. But doing it at player events felt really good because you've got like a bunch of people listening, and then afterwards people are going to come and chat to you about the topic of the thing you spoke about. All sorts of fun things like that. There was so one player event I went to, and this was quite soon after lockdown. And so a bunch of the people at the event were all new people, like hadn't actually been to an Empire event yet. And they were like, we're just so desperate to do Empire, we're going to this player event. And it was called the Way House. And I know they run it a couple of times at Eversley. And it was just after the breaking of all the mirrors in Sarvos happened. Anyway, we were at this event, and there was one player there who was a leaguer, and I thought, oh, okay. Didn't recognize them, didn't know who they were, but I went up to them and I said, oh, where in the league are you from? And they said, oh, I'm from Sarvos. So I was like, oh, I just want you to know I'm really sorry about what happened. And then we had like a really lovely long conversation about, what happened, my character's opinion on what happened, all this sort of stuff. And I was having a chat with the player of this character quite recently, and they said to me, you coming up to me at that event instantly changed my character's opinions of some highborn. Understandably, my character would be really angry at what the highborn have done and so on. But yeah, you came along and had that conversation and we spoke about it, and it's like, oh, well, not all highborn are bad. And it's those little things that you normally just wouldn't get an opportunity to do that. You just like, oh, there's a person over there, I'm going to go over and talk to them because I have the time and space to be able to do that without being like, oh, I've got to make it to my next meeting.
It's all those fun little like interactions that just, like you said, like usually are quite rushed. And it was what I wasn't prepared for was the fact that there was people from so many different nations. All like packed into this one event, and you had the opportunity to interact with them. I got the opportunity to have a lot of back and forth fun with the marcher that I wasn't expecting. I think I volunteered to fight for someone, which I just remembered and I wasn't expecting. And you're just like, these are the things that just won't actually happen normally.
You can find the conversations, can't you? I think I started off and people were like going, oh yeah, politics, and my character's like, politics. And eventually I found conversations of like, okay, we're gonna fight in the Glory Square, but we need people. I'm like, yeah, I'm down. When is it? E1 this time. Let's do it.
And that's it. Like, yeah, you're gonna have conversations which are like, not my circus, not my monkeys, keep walking on. And then you'll kind of bump into people who are talking about something, and you're like, oh, this sounds like something I'm interested in. I'm gonna poke my head round. And then again, the nice thing about socials is generally, unless people are obviously having a private conversation, in which case it's usually very obvious they're having a private conversation, you can just suddenly join groups of people and join in with a conversation, because it's kind of expected at those sorts of events. And there's the sort of willingness by the players to encourage debate and encourage conversation, and you know, just being able to pop in and say like, oh, you know, I heard you mention this, what are you discussing? And people being like, oh, well, we're just talking about this thing, you know, what's your thoughts on it? And that's really lovely, is this, again, this willingness for collective storytelling
and
in that respect.
It's feeding into the actual the way Empire works as well, like you were saying about this player's opinions on Highguard. That's what I'm kind of finding with Empire. Empire is all about, you know, it plays best when it's you're constantly changing your opinion on what's going on in the Empire, because the whole game is everyone's just talking about what's happening in the Empire. So someone will come up and you won't know anything about an Eternal, and then suddenly you can start forming an opinion about an Eternal because you've spoken to someone about it. And that is like especially with the nations, because that is, like you said, it's someone said, oh, I've changed my opinion about Highguard, and without sounding la-di-da, like in real life, I've had the opportunity of being on a cultural exchange, and that's a real life thing. You know, you have your opinion of what a certain group of people are like, or what a certain political ideal is like, or how people live, and then because of stereotypes and whatever, or what people have told you, and then you go and spend time with individual human beings, and you're just like, oh, this is what it's like. That's some of the best parts of Empire as a game, you know?
Absolutely. And like, I mean, I will also say, you know, History and Virtue, very much it's, you know, this is my group, my chapter, the Navigators of Virtue, showing what we are about. And it's a way of sort of saying, hey, we are a group who is about discussion, who is about hearing opinions, who wants to have these debates, who wants to discuss history, who wants to discuss virtue with all people. And so it's kind of also saying, hey, you know, if you want to have these kind of conversations, we're willing to have them with you, kind of thing. You know, we might not necessarily agree, but we're here to have the conversation. And I think that's always very interesting, is obviously same within Dawn and any other nation, each group has their own sort of thing and their own sort of style and the way they present themselves. So it's very much this is how we are presenting ourselves. And very much part of the group is this willingness to interact with the other nations, but still be very firm in, you know, but we're still highborn, you know, we're still who we are, but that doesn't mean we can't be open to other ideas and discussions from other people.
Like it was super educational in that sort of way, where like myself, and as an extension of that, RNL, didn't really know much about virtues, to be honest. We're very much like could like name them and wasn't too sure on a lot of information. But then she's learnt lots and has heard lots while being there, and has since started questioning people on, you know, is that really that virtuous? I mean, don't really think that is it? You know, and she's actually started to question people and judge them almost on it. And I'm like, wow, part of the game never saw happening.
And that's it. It's the experience of having things happen that you're like, I didn't plan for that to happen, but you know, I'm going to follow this thread and see where it ends up. I mean, we had one of the things which I really enjoyed was so another thing that my character's involved in is a group called the Fellowship of the Burning Rose, and we have like a small section in the pump room with like a banner and a mosaic and booklets about. And it was really nice because, you know, I wasn't pushing it. It was just a little section where it's like, if people want to look into it, they can, or if people want to come and chat to me about it, they can. But again, it's if you want to interact with it, you can. If you don't, you just ignore it. And it was really nice because by the end of the weekend, all the booklets had been taken. There's a wonderful photo that one of the photographers took of someone sat at the table literally reading the booklet and basically reading like what the group is about and what we're trying to achieve and so on. And again, it's having people being able to have those moments to just sit down and read something. You know, I couldn't tell you the amount of times people come up to me and give me something to read at Empire, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll read it later, put it in my bag, and then I don't look at it until I clear out my LARP stuff when I get home, you know. And that's not because I don't want to read it. I literally just don't have the time to sit down and read something. So it's again those little moments where you get to experience the other aspects that is happening on in the game that you just wouldn't have the time to do.
Yeah.
So since we are at time, we'll do a proper plug for History and Virtue. So you've already said, Scarlett, you're running it again, right?
Yep.
What time of year is it going to
It'll
be next year?
be in February. I believe the penciled in date is the Saturday, it's either the 23rd or the 24th. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's that sort of weekend on the Saturday.
Yeah.
It will be in the evening. It'll be good food, good people.
Well,
good location.
we'll be there, so it's good. It's all good people. It's local to us, you see. That's the thing. It was literally it was just lucky for us that we could just drive. We just literally just drove there, and then mind you, I think this time I might be, because Bath is, I've not been to actually been to Bath, like in the city itself, which is actually a very nice city. So
we should totally make a day of it this time, because I found out that there is like this little like really cool like tea house or something nearby that has all these like really cool things. I got sent all these photos and they were like, oh yeah, we all went to this tea house for like tea and cakes beforehand. I'm like, so next year we're going to have a whole day. And I'm still thinking about the food that was at History of Virtue.
I'm so glad people like the food.
Oh, the food was great.
Oh my god.
Yeah, the food was
really
good.
It's always that thing of saying to people, I know the portions look small, but trust me, you'll be full by the end of the night.
Also, I mean,
I had 2 and I was done.
Because they continuously kept me around, being like, more, and
there was like, by the time puddings came out, I don't think many puddings got eaten, because everyone was like, I'm so full, I've eaten so much, it's so good.
I made it work. Like I really made it work so that I could get something.
But one of the things I will say about coming to Bath for the event is, part of the reason I picked it on Saturday evening is to make it easier for people, and also people coming further away can stay over. Bath is a it is a sort of stag do, hen do kind of location, so there's lots of like hotels and Airbnbs and all sorts. And I know what quite a few people do, like say if they're coming from a bit of a distance, is they tend to book an Airbnb with a bunch of Empire players and they make a weekend of it. So you sort of do the event on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday you have a let's be tourists in Bath kind of day. And I think that works out for a lot of people. I keep sort of saying, on the Sunday I'll go out and we'll have like a nice meal with a bunch of people, but I'm always knackered by the Sunday, so I've not managed it yet. But I know a lot of other people do it. So
awesome! I can't wait for it. Right before we wrap up, do you want to plug anything else? Do you want to tell people where to find you? Because I know you have your commission-based presence as well.
I do commissions, costume commissions, predominantly for Empire, but generally I will do anything. My website is www.goldenmochi.co.uk. So that's golden, GOLDEN, and then mochi, MOCHI, which is like the little Japanese sweet. I'm also on Facebook, where I tend to update the projects I'm working on and stuff, though it's going to be quiet for the next week because obviously I'm in crunch mode for E1.
So at the time of recording this, it's like a week away, so by the time,
so much to do.
By the time this goes out, we'll be back from E1. So yeah. Oh, wasn't that a great E1, folks? Yeah.
That was a great E1.
Great time.
Great.
All alive.
Did everything I wanted to do. It's great.
I'll put all the information that you just said down in the description anyway for you folks. Right, thank you, Scarlett, for coming on.
Not a problem. It's been great fun.
That was awesome. Yeah, I feel like we could have gone for another couple of hours, so we'll have to have you back on.
As I say, always happy to be coming back on, and like I say, I've been playing the game since forever, so I can talk about a lot of different things.
Awesome, we appreciate you, Scarlett. Right, we'll say goodbye to the podcast, everyone. Right.
All right then.
Bye,
Bye.
Thank you very much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to find Scarlett on the internet, all the information is down in the episode description. Consider following and subscribing if you want to know when a new episode is posted. Until then, you can go and check out some of our other content we have done on the Empire LARP system and LARP in general. Until that next time, though, we love you and stay safe.